My fiancée called off our wedding, saying she wasn't ready to settle. So I canceled everything, sold the ring, and took the honeymoon solo. When I returned, her freedom had dumped her, and she was begging to rewind a life I'd already moved on from. What started as 9 years of building something real together had somehow become her prison sentence, though I didn't realize it until the night she demolished everything we'd worked toward with a single conversation. I'm Marcus, 29, a software engineer who believed in the old-fashioned idea that love was about choosing someone every day, not constantly shopping for upgrades. Vanessa and I met in college during our sophomore year computer science study group, where she was the marketing major who somehow made algorithms sound romantic when she explained how she'd use them to target wedding vendors for our future clients. 9 years later, we had the Charleston venue booked, the photographer secured, and invitations addressed for what I thought would be our beginning, not her escape plan. The cracks started showing after her promotion to marketing director at Coleman & Associates, when she began working late with the new creative team and coming home with this restless energy I'd never seen before. Her girls' trip to Las Vegas 2 months ago marked the real turning point, though I didn't understand it then. She returned with new clothes, new confidence, and a subtle distance that felt like she was evaluating our relationship through fresh, critical eyes. The dinner where everything unraveled happened at Morrison's Steakhouse, our usual anniversary spot, where I'd made reservations thinking we'd finalize the last wedding details over wine and her favorite filet mignon. Instead, Vanessa picked at her food while staring out the window, her engagement ring catching the candlelight as she twisted it nervously around her finger. "Marcus, I need to tell you something and I don't know how to say it without hurting you," she began, her voice carrying that rehearsed quality people use when they've practiced difficult conversations in mirrors. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our future, about whether we're getting married because it's what we actually want or just because it's what comes next." I set down my fork, watching her face carefully, already sensing the ground shifting beneath us like those moments before an earthquake when animals start acting strange. "What's bringing this up now? 3 weeks before the wedding?" Her laugh came out bitter and shaky. "Maybe that's exactly why. Everyone keeps asking if I'm excited, and I realized I'm not excited, I'm terrified. Not of marrying you specifically, but of this feeling like I'm closing the door on everything else I might become." The restaurant noise faded as I focused entirely on her words, trying to understand how the woman who'd spent months obsessing over flower arrangements and seating charts had suddenly developed existential doubts about our entire relationship. "Vanessa, what exactly are you saying? That you want to postpone?" She shook her head slowly, tears forming but not falling, like she was holding them back through sheer willpower. "I'm saying I feel like I'm settling for a safe, predictable life before I've even figured out who I really am or what I actually want. We've been together since we were 20, Marcus. Don't you ever wonder what else is out there?" The question hit like a physical blow because no, I didn't wonder, not about other people, not about other possibilities, not about whether the woman across from me was worth choosing every single day for the rest of my life. I thought what was out there was us, building something together, creating a family, making a life that mattered. Her expression crumpled with what looked like genuine pain, but underneath it I caught something else, relief, like she'd finally confessed a secret she'd been carrying for months. "I love you, Marcus, but I don't know if I'm in love with you anymore, and I can't walk down that aisle feeling like I'm giving up pieces of myself I haven't even discovered yet." We sat in silence for what felt like hours while other couples around us laughed and celebrated, their happiness highlighting the wreckage of our conversation. I realized then that this wasn't a discussion or a moment of doubt. This was her exit strategy, carefully planned and diplomatically delivered. She'd already emotionally left our relationship. She was just making it official. The signs became impossible to ignore after that dinner, though Vanessa pretended everything was normal while we figured out the logistics of our imploding relationship. Her friends started posting those cryptic Instagram stories about breaking free from expectations and finding your authentic self, the kind of inspirational quotes that usually accompany major life changes or fresh breakups. I noticed Vanessa liking every single one of these posts within minutes of them going up, clearly finding validation in their message of liberation from commitment. She scheduled what she called a proper conversation for the following Saturday at Grounded Coffee, the same place where we'd had our first official date 9 years earlier, though I suspected the location choice was more about public setting than nostalgia. When she arrived 15 minutes late wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something flowing and bohemian that screamed, free spirit, I knew this wasn't going to be a reconciliation meeting. I've made my decision, Marcus, she announced before even sitting down, her voice carrying forced confidence that didn't quite mask the tremor underneath. I can't go through with the wedding. I need space to figure out who I am without without this relationship defining every choice I make. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching her fidget with her purse strap while avoiding eye contact. How long have you been planning this conversation, Vanessa? Because it feels pretty rehearsed. Her cheeks flushed slightly, caught in the pretense. I've been thinking about it for weeks, maybe months. The Vegas trip really opened my eyes to how much of myself I've lost in this relationship. The Vegas trip where Dylan from her marketing team had also happened to be attending the same conference, according to the photos I'd seen floating around social media. And Dylan helped you reach this conclusion about finding yourself? Her face went pale, confirming what I'd suspected but hoped wasn't true. Dylan has nothing to do with this. This is about me realizing I jumped into something serious too young and missed out on experiences that could have shaped who I'm supposed to become. The careful way she said his name told me everything I needed to know about how much nothing he had to do with her sudden spiritual awakening. So what exactly are you asking for? A break? Time to explore? Or are you breaking up with me to see if the grass is greener with your coworker? She straightened in her chair, defensive now. I'm asking for my freedom, Marcus. I'm 29 years old and I've never been single as an adult. I need to know who I am when I'm not half of a couple. I leaned back and studied her face, looking for any trace of the woman who used to cry during romantic movies and plan our future children's names during lazy Sunday mornings. You want your freedom? You've got it. The relief that washed over her expression was immediately followed by something that looked almost like disappointment, as if she'd expected me to fight harder or beg her to reconsider. Just like that? You're not going to try to change my mind or ask me to work through this together. I shook my head slowly. Vanessa, you don't break up with someone you want to be with. You don't call off a wedding 3 weeks beforehand if you're looking for solutions. You do these things when you've already decided you want out. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, recognizing the truth in what I'd said. I do love you, Marcus. This isn't about not loving you. I stood up and dropped a $10 bill on the table. No, this is about loving the idea of something else more. As I walked toward the door, I heard her call my name, but I didn't turn around. Later, I would learn that she sat in that coffee shop for another hour, staring at her phone and probably texting Dylan about how unexpectedly easy it had been to end 9 years with a 20-minute conversation. Within 48 hours of our coffee shop breakup, I had confirmation of what I'd suspected about Dylan when our mutual friend Jake accidentally let slip that he'd seen them together at a downtown wine bar the night before Vanessa officially ended things with me. The timeline made perfect sense. She'd lined up her next relationship before terminating our engagement, ensuring she wouldn't have to experience any actual loneliness or self-discovery. I felt a strange sense of vindication rather than betrayal, like solving a puzzle I'd been working on for months without realizing it. That same week, I began the systematic dismantling of our planned future with the methodical approach I used for debugging complex software problems. The Charleston venue coordinator was surprisingly understanding when I explained the situation, even offering to refund our deposit minus a small processing fee since we were canceling with 3 weeks' notice. The photographer, caterer, and florist all followed similar patterns. Professional sympathy mixed with relief that they weren't dealing with a dramatic bride having a meltdown. Returning the engagement ring proved more therapeutic than painful, especially when the jeweler offered me 90% of what I'd paid, explaining that custom pieces like Vanessa's Princess Cut Solitaire were actually quite popular and would sell quickly. I walked out of that store with a check for $4,200 and the oddest sensation of freedom, like I'd just returned a burden rather than lost something precious. The hardest part was calling my parents and Vanessa's family to explain that the wedding was off, though both conversations revealed they'd noticed Vanessa's growing distance and weren't entirely surprised by the news. My mother's response was particularly telling. "Son, someone who's right for you doesn't need to find herself by leaving you behind." Instead of wallowing in self-pity or trying to win Vanessa back, I made a decision that felt both impulsive and inevitable. I would take our planned honeymoon to Ireland alone, converting what was supposed to be our romantic beginning into my personal restart. The travel agent initially tried to talk me out of it, suggesting I wait until I felt more emotionally stable, but I insisted this was exactly what I needed. I'd never traveled internationally by myself, never made major decisions without considering Vanessa's preferences, never planned an itinerary based solely on what interested me rather than what would photograph well for her social media. The solo trip began to feel less like consolation prize and more like the first genuinely independent choice I'd made in years. Each canceled wedding arrangement felt like removing chains rather than losing dreams, and by the time I booked my flight to Dublin, I realized I was more excited about this journey than I'd been about anything in months. The woman who'd claimed she needed to find herself had inadvertently given me permission to rediscover who I was without her constant influence and opinions shaping every decision. Ireland turned out to be exactly what I needed, though not in any way I could have predicted when I boarded that plane to Dublin with a mixture of determination and terror about spending 2 weeks completely alone in a foreign country. The first few days were awkward as I adjusted to making every decision myself: where to eat, what to see, how long to stay in each place, without having to negotiate or compromise with anyone else's preferences. I spent hours wandering through the streets of Dublin with my camera, rediscovering a passion for photography that I'd abandoned years ago when Vanessa complained that I spent too much time playing with my hobby, instead of focusing on our relationship and future plans. The photography workshop I signed up for in Galway introduced me to a group of solo travelers from around the world, people who'd chosen independence over comfort and seemed genuinely excited about life in ways I'd forgotten were possible. By the second week, I was exploring ancient castles along the Ring of Kerry, taking long walks on cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, and having actual conversations with strangers in pubs without checking my phone every few minutes or worrying about getting back to someone who was probably annoyed that I was enjoying myself. Meanwhile, according to the mutual friends who couldn't resist updating me despite my requests not to hear about Vanessa, her grand adventure in self-discovery was imploding spectacularly in real time. Dylan had dumped her after exactly 2 weeks of their official relationship, telling her she was too intense and emotionally exhausting. Apparently the excitement of forbidden romance lost its appeal once he had to deal with her as an actual girlfriend rather than a thrilling secret. Her confident social media posts about living authentically and choosing happiness disappeared overnight, replaced by private Instagram and Facebook accounts that our mutual friends reported were filled with cryptic, melancholy quotes about loneliness and betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was discovering genuine independence and rediscovering parts of myself I'd buried during our relationship, Vanessa was learning that her pursuit of excitement had led to exactly the kind of emotional instability she thought she wanted. Jake texted me halfway through my trip with updates I didn't ask for. Dylan's already seeing someone new, some intern from his department. Vanessa's been calling in sick to work and posting weird stuff about fake people and trust issues. I read the message while sitting in a pub in a tiny village whose name I couldn't pronounce, surrounded by locals who were teaching me traditional Irish card games and buying me pints because they thought my solo adventure was either brave or crazy. The contrast between my peaceful evening and Vanessa's apparent emotional chaos struck me as perfectly representative of our different approaches to life. I'd chosen growth and self-reflection, while she'd chosen drama and instant gratification. By the time I boarded my flight back to Charleston, I realized that Ireland had given me something Vanessa never could: proof that I was completely capable of being happy alone, that my worth wasn't dependent on someone else's validation, and that the life I'd thought I needed to share with her was actually more fulfilling when I didn't have to constantly consider someone else's mood, opinions, and demands. The man who returned from that trip was fundamentally different from the one who'd been dumped in a coffee shop 3 weeks earlier, more confident, more independent, and completely uninterested in someone who'd demonstrated that our 9-year relationship meant less to her than a 2-week fling with a coworker who saw her as entertainment rather than a partner. I'd been back from Ireland for exactly 4 days when Vanessa's campaign to reconnect began in earnest, starting with text messages that escalated from casual check-ins to increasingly desperate pleas for attention and validation. The first message arrived while I was unpacking my suitcase, still processing the transformative experience I just had. "Hey, I heard you went to Ireland. That's amazing. I hope you had a good time and found some peace." I deleted it without responding and continued organizing the photographs I'd taken, hundreds of images that represented the first creative work I'd done purely for myself in years. When I didn't respond, she escalated to involving our mutual friends, having them casually mention that she'd been asking about me and seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being after the breakup. Jake called me directly. "Dude, Vanessa's been reaching out to everyone trying to get information about how you're doing. She seems really messed up about Dylan, and I think she's realizing she made a huge mistake." I told Jake I appreciated the update but wasn't interested in being anyone's backup plan or emotional support system. The physical confrontation happened 3 weeks after my return, when Vanessa ambushed me in the grocery store parking lot looking like a completely different person from the confident woman who'd broken up with me 2 months earlier. She'd lost significant weight, her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well since her fantasy romance collapsed. "Marcus, please, I just need 5 minutes to talk to you," she said, stepping out from behind my car with tears already streaming down her face. "I know I hurt you, and I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I'm falling apart and I don't know what to do." I looked at her calmly, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sympathy, no residual love, just the mild annoyance you'd feel toward a stranger who was blocking your path. "Vanessa, your problems aren't my concern anymore. You made your choice when you decided Dylan was more exciting than our 9-year relationship." Her breakdown was immediate and complete, the kind of sobbing that attracts attention from other shoppers and makes everyone uncomfortable. I was wrong about everything. Dylan never cared about me. He just wanted someone easy and available. He told me I was too needy and dramatic, and then he started dating someone else before he even officially broke up with me. The irony of her complaining about being treated as disposable wasn't lost on me, but I felt no satisfaction in her pain, just a cold recognition that this was exactly what happened when people treated relationships like upgradable commodities. "I'm sorry that happened to you, but it doesn't change anything between us. You didn't leave me because of Dylan. You left because you thought I wasn't good enough, that our life together was somehow beneath what you deserved." She grabbed my arm desperately, her voice becoming shrill and panicked. I was confused and scared. I thought I was missing out on something, but I realize now that what we had was real and precious and I threw it away for nothing. I gently removed her hand from my arm, noting how her touch felt completely foreign now, like being grabbed by an acquaintance rather than someone I'd once planned to marry. "Vanessa, you didn't throw away what we had for nothing. You threw it away because you believed something better was waiting for you. The fact that you were wrong doesn't make me your consolation prize." Her face crumpled as she realized I wasn't going to be moved by her tears or her suffering, that the man she'd discarded so easily had become someone who valued himself too much to accept being anyone's second choice. "Please, Marcus, I know I don't deserve another chance, but couldn't we at least try to be friends? I miss talking to you, miss having you in my life." I shook my head slowly, recognizing this final manipulation for what it was, not genuine friendship, but an attempt to keep me emotionally available while she figured out her next move. "Friends don't treat each other the way you treated me. Take care of yourself, Vanessa." As I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror standing alone in the parking lot, probably calling Dylan or one of her enabling friends to complain about how cold and heartless I'd become, never understanding that what she was witnessing wasn't cruelty, it was self-respect. 18 months later, I was living a completely rebuilt life that bore no resemblance to the one Vanessa had walked away from, and the contrast felt like comparing a rough draft to a finished masterpiece. I'd moved to a sleek downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the harbor, gotten promoted to senior software architect with a salary increase that reflected my actual worth, and most importantly, I'd met Emma during a volunteer event at the animal shelter where she worked as a veterinary resident. Emma was everything Vanessa wasn't: genuinely kind rather than performatively sweet, intellectually curious about my work rather than bored by technical details, and completely comfortable with quiet Saturday nights at home because she understood that love was about choosing to be together, not constantly seeking entertainment from each other. Our relationship developed naturally over months of shared interests and genuine compatibility, without any of the drama or manipulation that had characterized my time with Vanessa. The confrontation that brought everything full circle happened at our mutual friend Sarah's engagement party, held at a beautiful venue overlooking Charleston Harbor where I'd gone with Emma to celebrate people who actually valued what they'd found in each other. I spotted Vanessa immediately when we walked in. She was standing alone near the bar, wearing a dress that looked expensive but somehow desperate, checking her phone with the frantic energy of someone hoping for rescue that wasn't coming. When our eyes met across the room, I saw her entire face change from practiced social smile to something approaching panic, followed by a desperate attempt to look confident and unbothered by my presence. Emma noticed my expression shift and squeezed my hand supportively. "That's her, isn't it? She looks lonely." I nodded, struck by how accurately Emma had read the situation with just one glance, while also appreciating that she felt no jealousy or insecurity about my past relationship, just gentle observation and empathy for someone who was clearly struggling. Vanessa approached us during cocktail hour, her smile bright and fake as she introduced herself to Emma with the kind of aggressive friendliness that screamed desperation. "You must be Emma. I've heard so much about you. I'm Vanessa, Marcus's college girlfriend. We dated for 9 years, basically grew up together." Emma shook her hand warmly, completely unbothered by the obvious attempt at intimidation. "It's nice to meet you, Vanessa. Marcus mentioned you two had a long history together." The conversation that followed was painful to watch, as Vanessa tried increasingly desperate tactics to create some kind of emotional reaction from me. References to inside jokes we used to share, questions about whether I ever thought about our past, comments about how much we'd both changed since college. "Do you ever miss those days when life was simpler?" she asked directly, her voice carrying a tremor that suggested this question meant everything to her. I considered the question honestly before answering. "No, actually. I don't miss anything about who I used to be or the life I thought I wanted back then." Her face fell completely, the mask slipping to reveal genuine devastation as she realized that our 9-year relationship had become something I actively preferred to forget rather than fondly remember. Emma excused herself to use the restroom, giving Vanessa the private moment she'd clearly been angling for, but instead of seizing the opportunity to make some desperate plea, Vanessa just stared at me with hollow eyes. "I ruined everything, didn't I? You look at me now like I'm a stranger." I felt a flash of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. "We are strangers, Vanessa. The person I thought I knew wouldn't have done what you did." As Emma returned and slipped her arm through mine, I watched Vanessa observe the easy intimacy between us, the way Emma made me laugh without trying, how naturally we moved together, the obvious contentment that radiated from both of us. For the first time, I think Vanessa truly understood what she'd destroyed and what I'd found to replace it. As Emma and I left the party hand in hand, walking through the Charleston streets toward our car, I felt something I'd never experienced before, complete peace with my past and absolute certainty about my future. There was no anger toward Vanessa, no satisfaction in her obvious misery, no lingering questions about what might have been if she'd made different choices. Just quiet contentment that I'd refuse to let someone else's poor judgment define my worth or derail my happiness. The final text message arrived 3 days later while Emma and I were cooking dinner together, her telling me about a difficult surgery she'd performed that day while I listened with genuine interest and admiration for her skill and compassion. Vanessa's message read, "I know you'll probably delete this, but I wanted you to know that seeing you happy made me realize what real love looks like. I'm sorry for everything." I showed Emma the text, not because I needed advice on how to respond, but because we'd built the kind of relationship where transparency was natural rather than forced. She read it quietly, then looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Are you going to respond?" I deleted the message without reading it again and put my phone in the drawer where we kept it during dinner, a ritual we'd established to protect our time together from outside intrusions. There's nothing to say. Some chapters end when you close the book, and trying to write more just ruins the story. Emma smiled and returned to stirring the pasta sauce, understanding completely that my past was just that, past, and that dwelling on it would only diminish what we were building together. That night, lying in bed with Emma reading veterinary journals while I reviewed code for a project I was excited about, I realized that sometimes the greatest victory isn't dramatic confrontation or satisfying revenge, but simply the quiet triumph of refusing to let someone else's chaos become your problem. Vanessa had taught me an invaluable lesson about recognizing my worth and never settling for someone who saw me as expendable, and for that education, I was genuinely grateful. Emma never asked about my ex-fiancé because she didn't need to. The difference between a woman who treasures love and one who treats it as a stepping stone toward something better was obvious in every interaction, every choice, every day we spent together building something real rather than chasing fantasies that never existed.